Hi, this is Jamey with Stonemeyer Games, and I'm here today to talk about my favorite game mechanisms, probably a couple of game mechanisms, in the Voyages of Marco Polo, a recent game released and designed by the designers of one of my favorite games, Tzolk'in. Marco Polo, the Voyages of, I'll just call it Marco Polo. Marco Polo has a few really cool things going for it. Overall, it's a worker placement game where dice, I can't even remember. I think dice are your workers. You also have pawns that you move around the board, but I think dice are your workers in the game. It's a dice placement Euro game. There's a kind of an area of the board where you're moving a guy around, like whichever your character is, you're moving him around Asia, and you're acquiring resources. You're earning victory points for those resources, and you have some end game goals. It's kind of a good mix of classic Euro game elements. And we've really been enjoying it in my group. We've been playing it a lot since we got it a few weeks ago. One of the coolest things about it, and this isn't one of the top mechanisms, but I think this is really cool, and you can see it in other reviews, there are some pretty powerful asymmetric abilities in Marco Polo. And this isn't like an option that you can throw in the game once you understand it. From game one, you are playing with very distinct asymmetric abilities. And I think it's really cool that they included them in the game. This is the type of thing that sometimes they would some games include them as an expansion. But this is inherent to the game. They decided that the game needed that variability from the asymmetric abilities, and they made them really distinct. Like, it's not just like you get an extra gold at the beginning of the game. They are powerful abilities that impact you throughout the game. I think that's pretty cool, and probably took a lot of testing for them to balance them. So I'm going to get to the two mechanisms that I think really are really interesting and in Marco Polo and how they relate to some other games and game design in general. One of them, as I mentioned, is that Marco Polo is a game where you're rolling dice and you're placing dice on the board. So there could be an element of luck here, and there certainly is. When you roll a higher number in Marco Polo, that number helps you get more resources. When you're getting resources, it helps you on certain actions. It gives you access to more orders that you can choose from. It lets you travel farther if you have a higher die roll. But, and I think this is really cool, on most of the actions on the board, if someone else has already placed their die there, the number on that die no longer matters to you when it gets around to you. If you want to take that action as well, for most of the actions, you can place a die or multiple dice on that action at the additional cost in money of the number on your die. And so this is really, really key to the game, because you obviously, most of the time, you want to just roll all high numbers. But if someone gets in on an action before you do, and you want to be able to take that action, it's actually helpful that you might have a lower number on your die, because you don't have to pay as much to take that action. You might get a lesser benefit from taking it. Like, you might get 3 camels instead of 6 camels if you had a 6 on your die. But the money is pretty tight in this game, so only having to pay 3 coins can make a big difference. I really, really like this, especially in any game that has dice rolling. I think you need a reason, even though like rolling high numbers should be generally a good thing, or low numbers. In Euphoria, rolling low numbers is usually good. It's better sometimes to roll higher numbers. But in general, I think you want to have something that you get excited about when you roll it, whether it's high numbers or a pair, things like that. But if you don't roll that, there should be a backup and a reason that you can use those lower numbers. One other example I can think of, and I haven't played Bora Bora, but I've read about how in Bora Bora, when you place dice on the board, I think it's something like the lower dice prevent higher dice from being placed there. It might be the opposite of that, where higher dice prevent lower dice from being placed there, but I think it's the other way around. So you can place a higher die on an action, and higher dice are good for getting in on that action, but if you place a lower die, then you're forcing other players, you're limiting that action for other players. So there's a pro and a con to higher and lower numbers. So anyway, I think this is really key in any game that has dice rolling, especially a Euro game that has dice rolling. And if you have any other examples that you can think of that do this with dice, where higher numbers and lower numbers are both good, I'd love to hear them in the comments. The one other little mechanism that I wanted to point out in Marco Polo, which I think was really clever, and it's kind of subtle, you have all these actions on the board you can take, where you place your dice and you take an action. But you also have what are described as bonus actions, and they're on the back of a little player mat that you get, a little kind of a reference guide that tells you these actions. And for most of them, you can take any number of them at any time during your turn. And these are actions, some of them are actions that could have been included on the board. Like the designers could have required you to spend a turn to take these actions. Things like completing an order, or claiming an extra die, or re-rolling one of your dice. That's a choice that they could have made, but I think it's really clever that they included these as bonus actions instead. At first, when I started playing, I thought it would be overwhelming, because you have to deal with all these actions on the board and these actions on the back of your player card. But it's more like they just give you the flexibility when needed to do some extra stuff. Or, like I said, you can re-roll your die, so there's a way you can pay to re-roll a dice if you need to, or change the number on a die. And I really like that you're given the flexibility to do that, and that they really honed the actions on the board to be the most interesting things that you could do to spend an entire turn doing. And they split off all the other stuff into these bonus actions. I'm guessing at some point during the game's development, at least some of those actions, the bonus actions, were actions on the board, and they just realized that no one had fun spending their entire turn filling an order or re-rolling their dice. And so they just made them bonus actions instead. I think this is really, really clever and a great design tip, a great design reminder for me as a designer, and a great tip for other designers, that if you have actions that simply aren't fun, split them off and just either attach them to other actions, or just make them bonus things that you can do at any time during your turn. And let players focus on the most fun elements and have the most fun choices that they can possibly make. Again, if you can think of any other examples of other games that do this, where there are core game elements that are a lot of fun and kind of sidebars that you can do when needed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that and the dice question. And I guess in addition, any other Euro games that have strong asymmetric abilities. Thanks. Have a good weekend.